Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have all three of you here. I would like you to introduce yourselves one at a time. Sarah, if you'd like to go first, and then just pass the baton when you're ready, okay?
So my name is Sarah Nelson. I'm the CEO of Community Crisis Services in Iowa City, and I'll pass it over to Emma.
Emma Nelson. I'm the peer support specialist and an animal caretaker at Community Crisis Services Healing Prairie Farm, which is a youth stabilization care farm model.
My name is Bree. I am also working with Emma as a peer support specialist at the Healing Prairie Farm.
One of you describe, maybe Sarah would be best for this question, kind of how the three of you integrated into working together, because I know that there's a large network of people that y'all are surrounded by and providing different avenues of service. So Sarah, kind of go into more or less what the nonprofit does in general, and then we can kind of explore how that, connects and provides to human services.
Sure. So Community Crisis Services has a wide array of services. Our primary function is to provide crisis services to the community. We offer kind of different points of entry if someone's experiencing crisis. So we answer for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline on 988, which I'm sure many people have heard about that transition. So we answer phone, chat, and text for 988, both locally and nationally. We have a mobile crisis program that responds with 2 counselors in less than an hour, 24/7, 365, wherever people are experiencing crisis in the community. We provide triage counselors for our mental health access point that operates 24/7 for adults in crisis, that has crisis stabilization beds, sobering units, medical detox, as well as crisis observation. And then we have Healing Prairie Farm, which offers crisis stabilization for youth, as well as a runaway and homeless youth shelter that's funded through federal RIE programming. And in addition to that, we have your more basic need type crisis services. So we offer we have a food bank, financial support services for rent and utility assistance, if people need help getting their IDs or documentation or need a temporary mailing address. So a very wide scope of services, but very intentional about meeting people's needs when they're in crisis and trying to connect them to all of the things they might need in those situations.
And Emma and Bree, how did you come about working in the positions that you have? Were you volunteers? Are you volunteers now? And also, how did you find out about just the community crisis in general?
So I always knew about Community Crisis Services. It's one of the big nonprofits in the Iowa City area. I love working with people, so that is something I've always been drawn to. When I heard about this farm opening, it was kind of like a vision of what I needed when I was younger. And it was like my dream job. So I applied as soon as the position opened and I got it. And now I've been working here and I love it.
So tell me, I guess, a little bit more about the origins of community crisis, and I guess the starting, I guess the grassroots, and then Sarah, if you want to dive into your position as well, so how you came into a role of leadership.
So Community Crisis Services has been around in the Iowa City area for over 50 years. Has a sad but cool history in terms of how it started. There were a couple of University of Iowa students who had a friend experiencing suicidal ideation, and they realized that there were no resources. There was nowhere to turn, nothing to do, and they founded the organization and started it, and it's grown to what it is now. So it really started as a crisis helpline center, which is our largest program, operating the 988 crisis helplines. And we also provide emotional support crisis helpline for all University of Iowa students, faculty, and staff. So that's the roots of the organization. I've worked in a wide variety of human services programs. I've been in the work for decades at this point. And I started working in mental health crisis services about 9, 10 years ago, and really found that to be the niche that was most meaningful to me. My why for this work, I came to this work because my biological father lived with schizophrenia. And I was brought up by my mom and my adopted dad, but always had a relationship with my biological father. And I could see the massive differences between the life I experienced and the life that my father experienced living with schizophrenia and living in poverty and having systems not listen to his voice or give him voice. And so it became, a personal passion of mine after growing up and seeing those observations my entire life. And I think that's what really drew me to the work initially.
Emma, you go ahead and you can let me know like what kind of brought you into the work that you're the position you're in now. What do you have like an origin story for yourself as well? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit before that it was kind of a program you would have liked to have in your youth.
Yes. So I am an autistic adult, very high on the spectrum, went through a lot of misdiagnosis, so never really got the correct help I needed. I saw how the programs that are put in place aren't really helpful and therapeutic and are usually more harmful because of the practices used. So I really just wanted to be the change. I saw the places that needed filled and I want to be the person that fills them. So I have some big goals because I don't want other kids to go through what I had to go through and feel the same way and to have a voice and to just not be quieted by the system, if that makes sense, and to be able to advocate for themselves.
So you saw a need for it, and now you're in a position where you have a little bit more to offer and invest. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And what kind of, and Bree, jump in whenever you like with this question as well. What kind of services do you find are very helpful at the farm?
So life skills teaching is major thing out here, emotion regulation skills. The knowledge that I have from places and skills that worked for me are usually helpful for other kiddos. So passing on that knowledge and those skills and how to use those skills and like that you understand is a big part of what we do out here.
Relationship and connection is the intervention. And I think that's what's lost in a lot of programs and interventions for youth and for adults, really, right? Is that, I don't care how many degrees you have or how much professional training you've gone through or what your resume looks like. If you don't understand that the primary intervention is to build relationship, connection, mutual respect, and rapport, none of those things are going to be effective and impactful. And it's why I feel so strongly about the peer support specialist positions being an equal voice at the table for the treatment team and for the teams that look at what kids need, because they bring things that professionals without lived experience couldn't possibly bring. So the input that they provide and the spin on, hey, I think we're looking at this wrong, and this is some of my experience, and I think what I see going on here is just something professionals can't bring if they don't have that lived experience. And there's lots of professionals that have lived experience as well as their degrees and all of that. But there's something about really making sure that that peer voice is meaningfully implemented in programs and that it's genuinely valued in programs. And that's something that I think we're doing very different at Healing Prairie Farm that I haven't seen done many other places, and definitely not with youth. There may be some adult programs that do it fairly well, but it's not very commonplace when it comes to programs impacting youth. And the insight that Bree and Emma are able to provide about their lived experiences when we're seeing certain things with the youth and things that they think we should consider in terms of resources and decision making is completely invaluable. And it's the, nothing without us, nothing about us without us, that I think is so important. And we see people speak about it a lot, but not genuinely implement it. And so we are really trying to adhere to that with fidelity.
Yeah, people, I think it's a human evolutionary kind of thing where it's very hard for us to walk our talk, right? We see it all the time. And coming back around to the experience part that brings you into the work that you're doing, Emma and Bree. Bree, tell me about your origin story, how you came connected and stay connected with your experience through the support, the peer support at the farm.
So I didn't know initially about the peer support program at all until I joined the farm. I had just so happened to be job searching because I knew that there was something more that I wanted to do. Originally, teaching was my go-to because that's something I've always loved, was being there for kiddos. That's been something I've been wanting to do since before I was old enough to consider people kids. But I don't know, something, when Sarah did my interview, I told her I originally looked at it and I was like, no, I don't have any of the experience that they're asking for on here. I won't do that. But something was just like, do it anyways. Just do it anyways. So I applied, and once I got into the interview and it was explained that there are ways for me to still be able to provide that initial help through peer support specialists, I was so on board, because this was a program that I would have wished was around when I was younger. Being able to have some place or somewhere where there are people that understand that, no, these aren't just bad kids. They're not acting out. They just need a little bit more support. They need a little bit more help. They need people that can hear them out. And some of these kids just don't have anybody. And I experienced having just one person being enough for me to go, okay, I can keep going. I can keep doing this. And this program is full of one people that can just do something. And even though I would like to take a lot of credit, I'm sorry, some of those farm animals take more credit, than I do personally. Those little farm cats are out there doing the work. But it's amazing to see the amount of kids that we can help and reach, and knowing that, especially where I come from, seeing all of the kids that I saw that could have benefited from this program, knowing that it's here now is really awesome.
Touching up my heartstrings, all three of you, especially the emphasis on experience, right? And this is a repeated kind of part of these conversations that I have with both professionals and people working in the, what I call the front lines, right? Is yes, the smarts is so important, and the theories, relatively speaking, those that have been looked back on and maybe improved, especially those in, in academia, they work and they have a purpose, right? But that's kind of half of the picture. The other part being, the on the grounds work or the personal life experience, your own story. And I've yet to really meet anyone who's part of the human services field in general, who wasn't inspired or kind of fell into the work that they're doing without a personal story behind it, right? Whether it's a little connection or a lot of connection. I love that y'all have found like a population, one of many I can understand that y'all serve, that, really is neglected, in the sense that, going back to what you said, Sarah, there is a lot of talk, a lot of adults, right, with a lot of talk, who speak on behalf of kids, and just, young adults as well, thinking that their expertise outweighs, these young kids' ability to describe what they're going through. And while in the past that might have made sense, we all know it's far more nuanced than that. And so what I love is that y'all are presenting exactly what it means to be a peer support specialist. And on that note, I kind of want to investigate and explore what peer support specialist is for y'all. So on the daily, how are you helping? How are y'all working across, all your services? from the farm to everything else you provide, suicide hotline. Give me a little bit, just a little taste of your day to day when you're, in these positions and working.
Emma, do you want to start off maybe and talk about some of the one-on-one and the groups and the way that those are all structured with peer support?
Yes. So there is one structured group a day that I offer peer support for all the youth at the farm Monday through Friday. And then throughout the day, I usually do one-on-one with kiddos, talking through life, talking about their problems, listening to them, saying it's like, I understand, just giving them a shoulder to so we do that. And then I also do aftercare with kids out here, which is really unique. That peer support work is helping them connect with the resources that are offsite at the farm. So that's also another little bit of my peer support work that I do out here. And then I integrate the animals out here into integrated therapeutic groups like goat yoga, and we go out and we groom the animals and stuff like that. So it's just all little therapeutic doses of peer support basically throughout the day.
And Bree, what do you find yourself doing as a peer support specialist?
I've gotten coaxed into cooking a lot because the kids are very interested when I start cooking, but usually I'm there towards the evening time, and I'm usually there. We do a lot of a lot of my time with the kiddos are usually one-on-one when they want to come talk. I kind of been helping with a couple of self-care things. There have been a lot of different kiddos that are unaware of how to do their hair. So I've done a lot of hair these last couple of months. I think more hair than I have, and I have 3 daughters. So, and they really enjoy that time of learning those type of things, ways to, take care of themselves, kind of advocate for themselves when they feel like they can't. And so I'm just usually there going, hey, if there's something wrong, you can talk to us, talk to anybody, let somebody know, letting them know that there are safe ways and safe places here to voice those opinions and thoughts, and learning, like Emma said, those life skills of how are we planning for the rest of the week? What are we going to be doing? All of those things are something that I kind of do towards the evening time once we've kind of settled down for the day.
One of the things I'd say Emma does a lot in her groups is it incorporates the DBT skills that she found most helpful, which I think is really nice because it's that combination of, what she's been taught professionally about DBT and that knowledge of what really was helpful and what wasn't. And so incorporating some of those skills into groups, I think, has been really and one-on-ones has been a really positive thing with strong outcomes. And we all believe a whole lot in DBT and the power of DBT, and a lot of the kids that we see with the presenting issues that they see it, DBT can be just such a helpful thing, even if it's not a full DBT therapy session, just some of the skills available in that. And, one of the things that I want to say about the work that Emma and Bree do and some of our youth advocates do at the farm that I think it tells the story of what we're doing and how we do it differently is we've had a couple of kids that have a history of running away, and we've had their missing person reports out. There's news coverage. There's Amber Alerts in some cases. And these are kids that in my entire history of working with youth in this field, I've never had a kid run away from a facility and call us when they later feel unsafe. We have had that now happen a handful of times where youth have either been discharged and run away from home, and then they call the farm a week later after we've been worried about them and trying to help their families find them, or they run from the farm and they call us to come pick them up. That has never happened in the history of my entire career. And I've overseen other youth shelters. That just doesn't happen if you don't build relationship and trust and connection. And so if there's nothing else about this model and what we're doing, we've been open since March, that I'm proud of. I feel like that's the thing I'm the most proud of, is that it shows that we're really walking the talk, that we are building those relationships and connections, and it shows the value in that, right? When people are like, let's talk about all these other things. guess what kept that youth safe? Guess what was able to get that youth off the streets and back into our care? Guess what taught that youth that there was someone that they could trust that genuinely cared about them? The relationships that we built, the work that they do with them when they're out there. And that to me is just so powerful. And the first time it happened, it was like, tears in my eyes. I couldn't believe it because I'd never seen it happen. And then it kept happening. And so it really speaks to the environment that all of our staff at Healing Prairie Farm and our peer support specialists and youth advocates have done to really emphasize that relationship and connection and how meaningful it is to making an impact on safety and keeping kids safe.
What do you find, and you've touched on this a little bit, but I kind of want to go deeper. The work that you do, all three of you, why is it significant to the whole field of human services? And I just want to reiterate that the whole field includes, nurses, police officers, EMTs, everywhere from, government officials, advocates. I mean, it's a broad range. So feel free to, pull those in, any kind of professions you find you're crossing or impacting because of the work that you're engaged with.
Emma, maybe you could share a little bit about a recent interaction that we had where it involved Healing Prairie Farm staff. Emma as a peer specialist, myself as CEO, other youth advocates, EMT, law enforcement, and a kiddo that was escalated, and kind of how we worked through that to try to have a different outcome.
So we bring a different view is the main thing. We bring a different view. We try to explain and advocate for youth that won't usually be heard, so that it's a less traumatic experience when dealing with those other services and human services. So just like giving them the knowledge that we bring, and then accept like their knowledge as well, and combining it to make it where it's a less traumatic experience, and trading off skills so that they can learn from us and we can learn from them, so we can just build the system to be more careful and not as reactive.
And, one of the things I often say, and we have great partnerships with law enforcement and our mobile crisis program and co-response and EMTs as well. But, some of the things that they do in their jobs, that's just part of their job, right? Like putting handcuffs on somebody, they feel like this is how we're going to keep everybody safe. And I don't say that as like it's a character flaw or that's their training, right? That's what they've been trained to do so frequently. But what we're trained to do and what we have to offer is to say, hey, that little thing that might not seem like a big deal could potentially cause trauma that stays with that youth for the rest of their life. And so, is there a better way that we can achieve safety for everyone here? Let's talk about it. Let's work through it. And so, that's work we do and across all of our programs on a very regular basis. And we're lucky to have strong partnerships with law enforcement that are receptive to that. But that type of advocacy is critical in the work that we do, and trying to, because, it's not part of their job to see the back end of that, right? The fallout of what might happen if you handcuff a child, or if you handcuff a child and put them in a secure vehicle and take them somewhere. What does that mean for that child a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later? That's the type of stuff that Emma can speak to personally. That's the type of stuff that, that we can say, like, in our experience, both personally and professionally. And that's where the peer positions come in as such a critical piece, because when you're not in crisis and you're advocating for those things, it's much better received by different systems than when someone's in crisis trying to, and not at their best, trying to advocate for that stuff. And so we've been able to drive different outcomes and come to different ways of doing things that we believe are going to significantly cause less harm to our youth in accessing other levels of care if that needs to happen.
Bree, could you kind of go in and kind of describe what other services you find, you can securely offer to the youth that you engage with every day, whether it be, food and shelter, or if it's, other lines of therapy, educational resources. What do you see that you're utilizing the most in helping these kids kind of heal, right, as they stay on this farm and interact with y'all?
I think one of the biggest things is and it basically touches on what Sarah was talking about having all of those degrees don't always necessarily help, because I'm seeing that not all of the professional things that everybody assumes would be the things that help these kiddos kind of work through things are the things that are working. Just being there, and everybody who is there is always themselves. They're always authentic. And because of these kiddos and where they come from, it's very easy for them to catch on when you're not being you. And so everybody that's there is always themselves, and that helps those kiddos open up, and that ends up being what kind of helps them feel more comfortable with expressing the things that have been going on that they probably have never talked about before with anybody else. And them just being there, being able to have someone to listen, which I know is one of the biggest things that a lot of kiddos in these positions experience. And I know I experienced a lot when I was younger, was not having anybody there to listen. And I've noticed just being there and sitting with them in those moments. I've sat under beds. I've gotten down on the floor. We've just been, and those are those things that kind of make them feel like, okay, I'm not so distant from this adult that's here in this space with me. I'm not sitting, on the floor while this adult is sitting in this chair with this notepad looking at me like I've lost my mind. No, I'm laid across this beanbag trying to struggle to get up with you. It's perfectly fine. But those are the things that I've noticed helps them the most, is knowing that there's somebody that's there that's not just trying to force them to talk about whatever it is they may not specifically want to talk about at that moment. And because we do that, we find more often that the kids are like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Or hey, can you call Emma? Or hey, and which I love because I've never been a part of a company this so close knit that a kiddo can go, hey, can you call Sarah? And I can tell them that I can actively call Sarah and be like, yes, I can get Sarah on the phone to talk. And that's what I love the most, is that no matter the level of authority someone is, they're there when those kiddos need them as best they can be.
Right on, Sarah. I
That
love
makes me
that.
want to cry. Well, the hardest, you asked about leadership. The hardest part about leadership for me was getting away from direct care, because that's why I went into the work. I love that part of the work. But then you get to a certain point where you're like, ooh, I can impact systems. And if I can impact systems, the number of children and people that I can help through my work grows exponentially. And so while I really miss Healing Prairie Farm, has been really wonderful for me, because I've gotten to do some more of that direct stuff that I haven't done in quite some time, and I just love it. But that is how that transition occurred for me, is that realization that like I can impact a caseload, or I can impact an entire community. And that's pretty powerful. And I've enjoyed every aspect along the way, from providing direct care to where I am now. It's all important, and it's all really meaningful, and has different impacts.
That's very lovely to hear. I've seen similar trajectories for people who start, the direct care route, and then eventually kind of, through their experience really, and their professional experience, but also personal experience, grow into these positions like yourself, and have a hard time leaving that direct care because they know the impact they have. And I very much appreciate that, because I feel myself torn both ways, right? Now I'm very blessed to have found storytelling as my avenue, but my thing is, my personal logo is, I like to help those who help, right? So all three of you, I consider my population. But in the beginning, it was children first. And then I saw a systematic issue. I was like, well, crap, there's something behind this door. Okay. And then it was the prison population. I was like, oh my goodness, there's a systematic issue behind this door. And so on and so forth, until it really just dawned on me. I'm like, no one's going to successfully provide the services they want to, whatever realm of human services they are in, right, when the systems themselves screw all of us, right? Like, how can social workers is my go-to, because they have such a high caseload usually in, every state there is. They have a bad reputation because they often fail or just barely meet the standards, but it's because they're so mistreated and they're not given the services and support. And I'm guessing with confidence that y'all have had to find your own pathways to solutions, because there is a lack, or a little attention given by the government, maybe local government, maybe state government, maybe federal government, right? Those who claim to be able to support what you're doing as a nonprofit, but don't follow through on that, right? They're a lot of talk. Tell me a little bit about that struggle that you might see often between the support that you're promised, whatever level it may be, whatever resource, and then, the attempts, struggles, and successes that you have when you are looking for solutions otherwise not provided.
So, I mean, I think that, we're lucky to live in a community that we have really strong local support from our county board of supervisors and our mental health region. But I think that we struggle when we start talking about, state and federal support and grantors, independent foundations understanding the depth of what we really need to do the work well, how much we need to pay people. If you want these really fantastic outcomes, we have to pay for talent or they leave the field, right? And so that's been like my passion for the last 15 years since I've been a director level and above, is how do we advance salaries for the people doing this really hard work. And in human services, I feel like my staff are unsung heroes, right? People talk about, and I love and respect all of these professions, but people talk about teachers being heroes. People talk about nurses being heroes. People talk about law enforcement being heroes. We've been doing this work in human services for hundreds of years, and it's virtually never talked about by the community. And it's something that makes my heart hurt a little bit that my staff don't get the recognition for the incredible work they do behind the scenes to help our communities thrive. And so I really try to speak to that a lot, to remind funders, to remind stakeholders, to remind people that are seeking the solutions or maybe, trying to solve these problems, that if all of the community nonprofits in our area went away, the community would fall apart, literally. The nonprofits that we are the backstop, we do what government cannot do, and so supporting nonprofits that do human services work is so important for that reason. Because without it, you would see just all the safety net would go away.
More to that, Emma and Bree, what are you seeing from the direct care perspective, your day-to-day peer support, are challenges you run into because of what Sarah just kind of broke down?
There is a need for more resources. There is very long wait lists, and like for transitional living programs and programs like that, I just find there's a big missing piece. We need more services that offer affordable rent for kids that are turning 18, resources that they're able to access without having to get parental consent. More just, we need more resources is what it is. The wait lists are very long. There's a lot of kids that need help and not a lot of resources for it.
Bree, would you say a lot of those things kind of fall in the basic needs category? Because it sounds kind of, when you're talking about living situation and the autonomy to make decisions for themselves, do you see that a lot of that is revolves around their basic needs for survival?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because a lot of these kiddos come from a lot of different places. And unfortunately, there are a lot of times where in any situation where going back to where they were before isn't the best option. But then there aren't a lot of resources, like Emma said, where we can give them any more options than what are provided. And with the wait list and all the other things, especially with our programs, limited time as well, we can only do so much in the amount of time that we're given. And so when we are all trying to push for all these things to happen in this short period of time, all the other resources are also strained because of their own, funding issues. So they're also trying to help, and we're all trying to do the best that we can. But it's only like they said, it's only so much that can be done when put in the position of going, well, what all can we do with what we have?
It's that, it's Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like the things that we really need that we don't have enough of are things like affordable housing, are things like enough food at the food bank. And ironically, those two programs within our own agency are the things that we struggle to get funded the most. So I can't send people out the door every single week with the amount of food that I know they need and that I want to send them out the door with. I have 68 people on a waiting list right now to receive rental assistance. And when we provide that assistance, it's going to be tough to meet their full need. And those two programs that I just said for basic needs are funded 95% by individual contributions. I don't get contract funding for that. Nobody wants to pay for food. Nobody wants to, they want to run housing through housing authorities and all of that. But there's other gaps where people just need a little bit of rent assistance and not 20 million hoops to jump through to get it, which is what we provide. But then getting funding for that is almost impossible. And so we have these really long wait lists, or we don't have as much food to provide as we'd like to and we know they need. And so, I've been working in food banks in Colorado and now in Iowa, and it's an ongoing issue in terms of it's usually the community steps up with individual contributions to help for those things, and then it's never meeting the need. And how are we supposed to stabilize someone's mental health? How are we supposed to get them enrolled in school and jobs and working towards all these goals that they may have for themselves if they don't have a house and they don't have enough to eat, And I feel like we preach this to the choir, and figuring out how to message this to people that might be motivated by different things than we are is what it's going to take to start to get more buy-in around how this helps. If you help with this makes your child's day at school better, even if they don't have food insecurity issues, because then everybody in class can focus better, and that means your child might have a better learning experience too. And so while that's not what motivates me personally, that might motivate someone else in the community to step up in a different way, recognizing that when we're all thriving, right? And so it matters. If we have a segment of our community that's really struggling, it impacts everyone in the community. And getting people to understand that has probably been the challenge of my lifetime, but it's very true.
Yeah, you're hitting a cultural wall there, which is like you said, preaching to the choir. We see it time and time and time again, where it's very hard. I'd say probably less hard in a local community scale, but the further out you get, when the further out someone's dynamic relationship to whatever the case may be, or the severity in the community, the further away they are, the less individual investment they have, or large group investment. And I'm so glad you touched on the buy-in for people. We haven't really touched on that topic in a long time on this podcast. There's, especially when you're kind of reaching out far for resources that others might provide, whether it be someone offering grants, et cetera, you really got to, not often can you bring them into the scenario and show them everyday life and why you need that support. So you got to find another way. And that's often buy-in. It's like, how are they going to benefit? And it was hard for me to come to terms that sometimes that means having their name on something. Right. It feels a little gross. It feels like we're tiptoeing into, like the market economy, but we have to find our workarounds. And I imagine that y'all have had to definitely get creative with the way you reach out and kind of lure the right people in that may not be part of your immediate community, but have a lot to offer. Should you be able to convince them, like, there's an exchange of goods here. Oh, I don't like the way that sounds.
I know.
I don't like the way that sounds. What have you, more in a positive light, how do you see the work you're doing positively impacting your community? Not just the kids you work with, but those that are supporting, those individuals, the local government. I mean, you said that when we all thrive, when we thrive and help as individuals, and that's absolutely true. I mean, at an animal level, that's true, right? We forget that. Mm-hmm. Science taught that to us first. How do you see the impact you're having? Also, make a reach into the community, surrounding you, and any three of you can chime in on that, because I'm sure you all have different perspectives on what you're seeing your support do.
So I think what's been really cool, particularly with Healing Prairie Farm, is it's been very clear how many lives have been touched by our opening this program. When we did our open house, I have never experienced, I feel like I've said this on this podcast several times now, but it's true. I've never experienced anything like this in my career where, we had hundreds of people come for our open house. That is not common. In addition to that, we were kind of driving people back from house to house because we have 2 homes on the property for the youth, and people were saying like, I wish this was available when my kid was struggling. If only this had been available when I was struggling. This was exactly what I needed, and that's why we started this program. I haven't said this up until this point, but I'm Emma's mother, hence the same last names. And that is that's where the vision for this program came from. Like, it came from the fact that this was what we needed when Emma was in crisis, and it did not exist. In fact, nothing we needed existed. The only thing that we were able to grapple onto was a few adults that cared enough to try to understand Emma and what she needed. But systems, every system we touched failed her. Every system. I can't think of a single system, correct me if I'm wrong, Emma, but I can't think of a single system or program that did anything to help her be the amazing person she is today. And so that's where the vision came from, that's why we wanted to do it differently. And so to hear that wasn't just our experience, that experience was, and Bree said the same thing when we interviewed. Bree said, and it was one of the reasons I was like, you're hired. Like, this was what I had dreamed about when I was younger. This is what I needed that didn't exist. And so just to hear that echoed by the community and to be able to be a part of creating that and bringing it to life has been a really incredible experience. And as a result, we get so many community members that are engaged in supporting the work that we do.
It's so funny that Sarah brings that up, because that was literally the main reason why I knew I had to start, was because I remember writing in a small composition notebook when I was like a sophomore in high school of this idea of having all these kids that needed this help on this big little piece of land so they can just get away and get some help. And so when I saw it, I was just like, this is going to be so amazing. And I see that the community they also see it that way, because whenever I walk around outside in my Healing Prairie Farm shirt, which, by the way, the most comfortable shirt I own, I always get questions, and I'm always super excited to answer. I have learned so much just talking to the people out in the community. I stopped for gas and explained to a lady the program, and I found out that Come and Go has a budget for giving to nonprofits, and she wrote our name down because she goes, this is where I think we need to be putting our budget for that this year. And so finding all these people that are just like, this is something, like Sarah said, so many people that are going, this is something my kid would have benefited from had it been there. This is something that I would have loved to have, is what kind of makes it feel like everything that we're doing is on the right track, because so many people have said repeatedly that this is something they could have benefited from. This is something I know I could have benefited from when I was younger. And it really, I've seen, even being in the house with the kiddos, is just bridging that gap between one extreme or another, and kind of giving them that space to not always feel like there's nothing else for them except one worse place than another place. And it gives them a bit of a cushion of understanding. And because going from hearing, oh, the problem, you're the problem, this bad thing, especially when a lot of people don't understand where these kids are coming from, and some kids lash out and they might seem, oh, this is a bad kid, and it's just a situation that they're in. So having a bunch of people that go, no, I understand that's you're not it, and knowing that there are so many other parents that are just like, if there was someone else there with me to help me tell my child that they weren't the issue, this could have turned out so different. So, and the community is very, very vocal about how excited they are about this program.
All right, Emma, round us out.
I feel like everything I'm gonna say is pretty much repeating, but the community support and engagement and the voicing of how much the community needed this program is just amazing to see. And the support is just unconditional. I never expected it. I mean, the open house, we had cars lined down the highway. It was literally over hundreds of people. I was crying. That's how amazing it was.
So you've got me inspired to as we round out this interview, kind of reframe one of the questions I usually ask. And often it's, what advice would you have for students or new professionals? But I want to tweak a little bit and ask, what advice do you have to people that are in positions like y'all's, whether it's in a leadership position or direct care? How do you suggest people engage with their local community and get people involved? Because it sounds like y'all have put so much effort and that the community has turned around and surprised you, quite literally. How do you maintain those relationships or at least get them rooted in something that'll last? Sarah, I'm going to have you start because I know you have the most experience under your belt as far as maintaining those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really the reason we have these great relationships and the reason that we have the support, and I think we'll continue to have the support, is because the community recognizes that we're striving to do something differently, that we're striving to create a program that is truly developmentally appropriate, that's truly therapeutic for youth experiencing crisis or homelessness, that truly cares about the relationship that we build with our youth. And so I think just the nature of the innovation behind how we're doing the work is what has created that buy-in and that community support. I'll hand it off to Emma on the tip. Maybe she can jump from here. But, being a peer support specialist and telling her story, she meets with community members and donors and people that help with the animals, and she tells her story, and so I'll pass it to you, Emma, but I think that that's extremely powerful.
Yeah. So a big thing I do is I love telling my story. I've gone to multiple groups and meetings. I've talked with law enforcement officers, giving my story and how I experienced it and how this vision is going to help. And I know it will help is a really neat aspect that a lot of people don't know because they never experience the problems in the other systems and those programs. So I think telling the story and why the farm is here for what it's for and how it's going to help makes the community very involved and they get very engaged and they love hearing updates about the farm. And it's speaking about the story is really a main thing on keeping the community engaged.
And let me tell you, there's something powerful about when you're no longer in crisis and you share what you went through when you were in crisis. Emma and I were recently a part of a panel where, she was talking about what it was like to be put in handcuffs in junior high because she was having what most people would know is just a, sensory overload meltdown, and being taken to the police station. When you're standing there, not in crisis, as a professional, telling this story to people, it has a major impact. When she tells the stories about her hospitalizations, and she's now standing there, and she's, the the professional that she is, the wonderfully well-adjusted young woman she is, they don't expect that. It takes them by surprise to hear everything and Bree, you've probably had this experience too, right? Like it takes people by surprise for you to say, these are all the things that I went through and the horrible ways that the system treated me. And here I am. I was worth the investment, and these kids are worth the investment. There is no throwaway child. There is no child that's too far gone for us to help. And so that is extremely powerful.
I would say, which is pretty much the same thing, as just being honest, staying honest to the situation, because like Sarah said, I experienced a lot of times where it was just me trying to figure things out. And it is, which like, it always makes me really emotional because like this program makes me so happy, because being able to share with a kiddo or share with somebody or anybody, that especially the community that'll listen, where I started from and how I got here, which like Sarah said, it's always surprising to a lot of people to assume that, you know, most people who get to places, everybody's just like, oh, your life must have been really good. There's no way that you could have went through. And when I start to delve into the amount of things that I've had to go through, especially like I turn 30 next year and I feel like I've lived 30 lives already too much. And so it's always a surprise when you explain to people, this is where we came from. This is how we started, and being able to stand in a position where we can help get kiddos to where they are. Because a lot of kids, and I know I was that kid, that in that moment, in that time, I don't see anything else. This is it. This is all I have. There's no way that anything better is happening. And that's where that mindset starts. But having peer support specialists who goes, no, it's not. We were there. And and to be able to see somebody, to be able to, especially like looking at Emma, looking at anybody and just going, you're telling me this is where you were and this is what you're doing now, is always a really, really powerful conversation. And I know that that's 1000% going to always get a community to recognize that this program and these things are necessary, because a lot of people in this position truly believe that their future doesn't exist.
And I just want to say that's what makes peers so unique, because somebody that's, 45 now, I was taught boundaries, 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 right? Social workers are taught boundaries. Boundaries are important. Healthy boundaries are important. And even the way peers deliver and talk about where they've been and where they are now always has to be delivered through a message of hope. It always has to be delivered through a certain lens for it to be effective. A peer can't just trauma dump what their experiences were and think that that's going to be helpful, right? But what they can do that's unique to peers is be able to say, like, this is where I've been, and let me talk to you about how I've gotten here and where the hope is, and that this isn't all there is for you. And I think that that is the power of peers. I've always pushed, even in traditional social workers, the power of some personal disclosure. Like, how do you expect anybody to listen to you and your advice if you're not willing to share anything about yourself to build relationship? And so it's something I've challenged in this field forever, that, there is appropriate disclosure when you are skilled at knowing how to do it the right way. But peers take that to a whole nother level and impact lives in a way that I just don't think any other position can.
You got me tearing up over here. All three of you. Because you're touching on so many things to go into, but I want to round out this conversation and thank all three of you for joining me for this podcast. You'll have some incredible experiences and perspectives that I know our viewers they're gonna connect with, if anything. So thank you so much, Sarah, Emma, and Bree.
Special thanks to our guests, Sarah, Emma, and Bree. Are you or someone you know interested in joining us at the roundtable? Let's talk about it. Connect with the team at info@nationalhumanservices.org. You can find all our roundtable conversations on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the iHeartRadio app. Be sure to follow us on social media and check out our website for everything NOHS.